Alright, we're talking about some crazy moon landing conspiracies.
Are they real? Are they not? A lot of outlandish claims are going to be made today, so your job is to either prove us right or wrong in the comments.
Like you always do. I guess it's a typical day.
Yeah, roast us, see what you got.
Let's get right into it. One of the biggest questions on a lot of people's minds is, why haven't we been back to the moon? There were a handful of missions from 1969 to 1972, and then that was that. Yeah, we went a few times, nothing left to see here. Now, NASA has said they've just turned their attention to other projects, but really? We don't want to do any archaeological digs up there, see if we can find any signs of maybe alien life having visited at some point? You know, build some crap up there maybe? Nothing? Interest in exploring the moon has basically dropped off completely at this point, and that's led some to believe that we never even made it up there in the first place.
Okay, next up we have the fact that all of the original footage of the Apollo 11 moon landing taken by the NASA organization somehow got erased. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to call BS on this one, because first of all, how the hell do you just accidentally erase the footage of one of the most historically important moments of all time? And second of all, if the footage was actually lost or erased, how did it not become an international scandal, ending with somebody publicly losing their job and being collectively condemned by the entire country? In 2006, NASA said the tapes were lost, and then in 2009, they claimed that the tapes had ended up in a pile with 200,000 others that became degaussed, meaning magnetically erased. I mean, you're kidding, right? The tapes were then restored by experts, meaning that if someone were to claim that the tapes are fake because of the fact that the video has clear markers of alteration, all NASA would have to do is claim that those alterations were necessary in order to restore the video. I'm just not buying it.
Another detail many moon landing deniers point to is the Neil Armstrong reflection discrepancy. Allow me to explain. In this iconic photo of Buzz Aldrin on the moon, eagle-eyed conspiracy theorists noticed something quite peculiar: Neil Armstrong's reflection in Aldrin's visor. That's not the peculiar part, I'm getting to it. The plot thickens when they realize Armstrong's hands are seemingly empty, prompting the question, where on Earth, or shall I say, where on the moon, is Armstrong's camera? Did Armstrong even take the photo at all? NASA insists he did, but it doesn't look like it. If not him, then who though? Did E.T. decide to snap a pic for them? Or was this whole thing shot on a soundstage in California? Or of course, there's the possibility that NASA must have some snazzy, like, cameraless photography technology up their sleeves. Now, some people say it's just a case of perspective and timing. Armstrong's camera was positioned in a way that it just wasn't captured in the reflection, but I don't think Hannah's next point is gonna be as easy to explain.
Next up, apparently not only does NASA spread misinformation, but they also distribute disingenuous artifacts. In 1963, after NASA supposedly successfully completed the Apollo 11 mission, 3 of the astronauts visited the Netherlands, during which time the United States ambassador accompanying the trio gave the Dutch Prime Minister what he claimed was a moon rock, but has since been identified as nothing more than petrified wood that has never been anywhere near the surface of the moon. When this information came out, the US Embassy was unable to explain why that would have happened or how, but they claim they were investigating. Whatever that means. None of you should be surprised to learn that the supposed investigation went absolutely nowhere, and to this day there is no reasoning behind why the Netherlands would have been given a fraudulent artifact once valued at $500,000 US, but now valued at around $70.
Here's another hot take. What if the moon landing really was a success, but there are just details we haven't been told? Maybe on that last mission to the moon in 1972, they saw something that made them never want to come back. We may look at images of the moon and see it as nothing but an empty mass of rock and sand, but there's a whole side of the moon humans have never set foot on, the dark side. And we really aren't 100% sure what could be lurking over there. There's a good chance it's just more of the same boring crap we have on the light side, but could there also be an entire species of creatures dwelling in the dark craters and recesses of the moon? Could these creatures have slithered from their shadows to give a grave warning to the astronauts of the Apollo 17 mission to never return? To buzz off? possible.
Blowing its way into number 5 is the waving flag theory. Some conspiracy theorists have pointed out that when the first moon landing was broadcasted on live television, the viewers could clearly see the American flag waving as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin planted it into the ground. So the problem with this is that there's no air on the moon's atmosphere, which means there is no wind that could cause the flag to blow. NASA claimed the flag was stored in a thin tube and the ripple effect was caused by it being unfolded before being planted. Others claim that the rippling of the flag was caused by the astronauts touching and shaking the pole. Number 4 takes us to the Sea Rock. One of the most famous pictures from the moon landing was a rock with the letter C engraved into it. The letter C appears to be almost perfectly symmetrical, which means that it is highly unlikely to be a natural phenomenon. So this makes many people believe that this rock is actually a prop that was used. They suggest that a production crew member could have turned the rock the wrong way accidentally, which exposed this letter to the camera, because Apollo was the first ones there, so how could have someone been there before and put the letter C on this rock? NASA countered this argument by saying that it could have been a strap here that got tangled up somewhere in the development process. They also went on to blame a photographic developer for adding the letter C as a practical joke. Landing its way into number 3 is the identical backdrop. Take a look at these two photos from the Apollo 15 mission. They clearly have identical backdrop despite NASA claiming that these photos were taken miles apart. One of the photos even showed the lunar module, so when all of the pictures were taken, the module had already landed. So how could there have been one picture and then disappear in another? Some hardcore conspiracy theorists believe that NASA used the same backdrop while filming different scenes for their moon landing videos. NASA came back with their response that since the moon is a lot smaller than Earth, horizons can appear significantly similar to the human eye. Okay, so we're almost at the top of this list, but first, coming into number 2 spot, we have the crosshairs. The astronauts had cameras with crosshairs to help them with scaling and direction. These crosshairs are imprinted over the top of all photos. Some of the images, however, clearly show the crosshairs behind objects in the scene, which implies that the photographs might have been edited. Many objects are seen to be in front of the crosshairs, including the American flag that was seen in one of the pictures and the lunar rover in another picture. Okay, so making its way into number 1 for the top 10 moon landing hoax theories is the lack of stars. One of the most compelling arguments for why the moon landing was a hoax is the lack of stars in any photographs or videos. Since there are no clouds on the moon, stars should be exceptionally visible and significantly brighter than what we see here on Earth, because a lot of times I don't see it because of light pollution. Many of these conspiracy theorists believe that NASA could have found it impossible to map out the exact location for all these stars, so NASA intentionally left them out with the excuse that the quality of the photographs washed out the visibility of the stars. So I'm starting to think this, one of two things. NASA is really good at producing videos and like they are good at Photoshop. NASA isn't scientists, they're actually filmmakers. I don't know if you believe that. Or maybe the moon landing was actually real.
Next up we have the death of Gus Grissom, an incredibly popular astronaut who was an incredibly outspoken critic of NASA's space program during his time working for the agency. While Grissom did become the third person to fly into space, he still didn't believe that NASA had either the knowledge nor the technology to make it all the way to the moon, an opinion he wasn't afraid to share with the public. While training for the Apollo 1 mission, after communications failed during a test, Grissom stated, "How are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings?" He also picked a lemon from his backyard and tied it to the spacecraft as a joke, saying that the technology was a lemon and not nearly advanced enough to make it to the moon. In another controversial move, Gus held an impromptu, unauthorized press conference criticizing the space program. Many believe that because of all of this, NASA, in collaboration with the CIA, decided to take him out. During an underground simulation, a spark underneath Grissom's seat ignited a fire that claimed the lives of himself, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. Some people believe that the 3 men actually died after cyanide gas was released into the cabin to kill them and that the fire was used as a cover-up, but as always, I want to know what you think.
Here's another fishy part of the whole moon landing thing, all those sick pics Buzz and Neil took up there. Some of them look really a little too gorgeous and pristine. Now, it's not like you couldn't get quality pictures back in the late 60s. I mean, like, have you seen 2001: A Space Odyssey? That movie looks like it could have come out last year. But for 2 astronauts untrained in the ways of the camera, having just risked their lives flying up to space, who have then just set foot on a place no one has ever set foot on before, out in space, like with all that excitement, all those nerves, somehow they're gonna snap these cinema quality pictures? I've looked through old family photo albums. Even home pictures from the 90s look like junk. So my point is, what's the deal with that?
Speaking of the Space Odyssey, what if what we are all thinking right now is true and the moon landing was really faked? Because of course we are all thinking that right now. Well, how the hell would they have done it? The answer to that question is actually quite simple. Stanley Kubrick, you know, the guy who directed A Space Odyssey as well as The Shining. Well, many people believe that the guy not only directed award-winning movies but also internationally deceiving publicity stunts as well. Shortly after footage of the moon landing was released, Kubrick got to work on The Shining, which was absolutely chock full of references to the Apollo 11 manned mission to the moon. The first and most obvious being that the character Danny is wearing an Apollo 11 sweater in the film. The second being room 237, which didn't actually exist in the hotel where the movie was filmed, but was added in reference to the moon, which sits just about 237 miles from Earth. Room 237 is also the room in which Kubrick supposedly staged the moon landing in the NASA headquarters. As we heard James say, clearly he had the technology. We saw it in Space Odyssey, so this is probably just Space Odyssey Part 2, another day at work for the guy. You can also see Tang cans, which are a space food made for astronauts in the movie, and the carpets in the movie have a pattern matching that of the launch pad in which Apollo 11 took off from. Did they though? Did they?
On any movie set, you also need some props, right? For example, Hannah and I's wardrobe here at Most Amazing Top 10 is carefully curated and tailored on the daily. Well, one photograph taken on the moon shows a rock with a very intriguing marking on it, something that looks a lot like the letter C. You see, some folks scoured photos taken on the Apollo 11 mission and were surprised to see the C, so they analyzed what they saw and decided this one rock must have been a fake. See if you can see this C in this photograph they saw. I certainly see what they saw. That's a C to me. So the question is, how did the great Stanley Kubrick, of all people, manage to let something like this slip? It's almost a bigger mystery in itself, right? I mean, he must have been pretty spaced out. He had spent all this time working on 2001, after all, which came out the year before the Apollo 11 mission. Maybe he was just bored of all the science fiction stuff and got a bit lazy. I can see it.
So, if the moon landing really was faked, why was it faked? Well, there's a few reasons as to why the United States would have wanted the rest of the world to believe that they were capable of becoming the first nation to make it to the moon. One, of course, being bragging rights, or in political terms, national prestige. A demonstration of the nation's amazing scientific and engineering capabilities that could be used as an intimidation tactic during the Cold War. It also incentivized foreign countries to invest in and become allies to the United States, so a bit of a win-win there for them. Not to mention, there was also a massive amount of political pressure on the US after President John F. Kennedy challenged its greatest minds to succeed in sending a man to the moon before the end of the decade. They made it just in time. Coincidence? You tell me, but here's the thing. You're going to tell me that no mission prior to Apollo 11 was a success, but all of a sudden, a team of 3 astronauts make it to the moon and back completely unharmed? I don't know. It seems pretty far-fetched if you ask me.
Our number 10 spot, this theory is a little far-fetched in my personal opinion, but some theorists believe that the footage was filmed in a studio and the editors reduced the speed to slow motion in order to mimic the low gravity conditions. It has been suggested that if you increase the speed of the footage by about 2.5 times, the astronauts appear to be moving in Earth's gravity. They also believe to account for the astronauts jumping high, hidden cables and wires were used. Number 9 takes us to the discrepancies with their shadows. On the moon, the sun is the only strong light source, meaning all of the shadows should be parallel with one another. However, this is not the case, because seen in all the videos and photographs, the shadows fall in different directions. This made many people believe that there must have been multiple light sources, which suggests that the landing photographs were taken on a film set. NASA argued that the uneven landscape was the culprit for the strange shadows. So in at number 8, we have the small impact crater. This conspiracy theory suggests guess that if they really landed on the moon, there would be a sizable blast crater underneath the lunar module after landing on it. On all of the footage or photographs of the landing, there wasn't a visible crater. The surface of the moon is covered in fine lunar dust, but even this doesn't seem to have been displaced while landing. NASA combats this theory by stating that the module required significantly less thrust due to the low gravity conditions that it would have done on Earth. So everything just seems to have some sort of explanation. And at lucky number 7, we have the mysterious object. When the photographs of the moon landing was released to the public, theorists noticed a mysterious object in the reflection of an astronaut's helmet from the Apollo 12 mission. They claimed that this object appeared to be hanging from a rope or wire, which led to some to suggest that this is an overhead spotlight that can typically be found, of course, in studios. To this day, this object still remains unexplained, but due to poor quality of the photograph, maybe this was done on purpose, I don't think we'll ever gonna know what this object really was. Up next, in at number 6, let's talk about Van Allen radiation belt. The astronauts en route to the moon had a trajectory that would pass through the Van Allen radiation belt. The belt is held into place by the Earth's magnetic field, and it is known to stay in the same place. The Apollo missions to the moon were the first ever attempted to transport humans through this belt. Many people believe that the levels of radiation emitted from this belt should have cooked the astronauts when they attempted to pass by this belt, despite the many layers of aluminum coating they had on. However, NASA argued that the astronauts were only exposed to this radiation for a short amount of time, so they only received a very small dose of it.
Let's talk about the man who very well could have directed this hoax of a moon landing, Stanley Kubrick himself. Is it not strange that just 1 year prior to this spectacular moon landing taking place, Stanley Kubrick released his classic film 2001: A Space Odyssey to critical acclaim? Now, not only is this movie incredible based on its story, but visually it actually holds up. I saw 2001 a few years back when it was released in theaters, and honestly, it looks like it could have been made today. The ships look real, it's fantastic. It looks like they're actually flying through space. So the idea that replicating a space landing in a Hollywood studio backlot would have been beyond human capability at the time of 1969 is simply not true. It could be done. Perhaps members of NASA saw Kubrick's film. What am I saying? Of course they did. They're space freaks. Of course they went to see it. And then they made Kubrick an offer he couldn't refuse. Perhaps the moon landing is Stanley Kubrick's most controversial film, right behind A Clockwork Orange. Wouldn't surprise me. The man was a genius, and he didn't seem like the type who would run his mouth and reveal any big secrets. Speaking of film quality for a moment though, let's talk about the quality of the photographs themselves. This was 1969. These men were in space. They were not professional photographers, they were astronauts. So why did these photographs look so high quality, almost cinematic? Some of them look like images from movies you'd see on the back of a DVD. If you don't know what a DVD is, I suppose you're too young. DVDs were movies that you could buy. Yes, as I just discussed, movies could look exceptional even back then, but I must stress once again, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong didn't make a living as cinematographers. Have you ever looked at family photos from the late 1960s? They look like crap. Even with the access we have to high quality cameras right on our phones today, we still get terrible pictures, and they were in space. I, for one, would not be calm and collected enough to take an amazing photograph. But if you're in a studio with Stanley Kubrick on set, you know what I'm getting at. Next up, we have similar backdrops. In a number of photos taken on this moon photo shoot, people have pointed out several instances where the backgrounds appear all too similar. It's almost as if they were filming in a studio with rather limited space at their disposal and only a certain amount of matte paintings backdrops. Now, yes, this is the moon. It's not like there's much to look at, and sure, maybe several of the pictures were, of course, taken close together, but some of them were stated to have been taken miles apart, and yet they don't appear to have been. For two men that had an entire moon to themselves, you'd think that the backgrounds would have looked a bit more varied. Instead, we see photos, the same hills, the same rocks. Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think that I'm not fooled. Proof of props. In the plethora of pictures that were supposedly taken on the moon, there's one rock that some hawk-eyed skeptics have pointed out, a rock that seems to be labeled with the letter C. Now, unless a crew of Martians landed on the moon before us, who also happened to share our alphabet, it seems highly unlikely that a space rock would have a perfectly shaped C etched into it naturally. This has led a number of people to deem this rock a prop. Perhaps it was turned over by accident, or the photographer accidentally took the photo at the wrong angle, but I, for one, find this very suspect. What does the C stand for? Maybe it's just how the props are organized. A, B, C, and so on. You know how the alphabet goes. Or maybe this C stands for con or cheat. Take your pick. Some have pointed that what appears to be a C on the rock didn't actually appear in the original NASA prints, but who's to say really? When we take the other evidence into account, again, it seems highly suspect. And coming in at number 1 is the fact that we've never been back to the moon. Now, pretty much all of these conspiracy theories are hotly debated, if not outright debunked, or at least attempted to be debunked. But this is one that honestly does seem pretty questionable to me. NASA has stated that their attention turned to other projects. There were also geopolitical reasons for abandoning more moon landings, and sure, there's a good chance that this is indeed the case, but at the same time, like, really? The first moon landing happened in 1969, and the last was in 1970, and that's it? Just 1 year, and they were like, yep, I think we're done with all that. Is that how science works? We just look at something a few times and then ditch it completely, move on to something else? It just seems pretty bizarre that we haven't been back in over 50 years. Especially as our technology has progressed, you'd think we'd want to take another trip up there. Well, maybe we never even went in the first place. Ever thought of that? The Apollo 11 mission, the first time astronauts landed on the moon. Is there more to the story than what we've been told though? Don't worry, I'm not getting into fake moon landing conspiracies. Instead, I'm talking about something strange that happened on the moon that was never officially publicized. In 1969, Neil Armstrong and lunar module pilot Buzz Aldrin reported receiving these strange radio signals while they were on the moon. The signals were unlike anything they'd encountered before, and NASA has never fully explained what these signals were or what caused them. The astronauts themselves were concerned enough to report the signals, but all we've been given are vague explanations about, quote, space interference or static. But could the signals have been coming from something else? Some believe these signals could have come from extraterrestrials, possibly even a signal that was coming from something on the moon, or some type of craft that was observing the astronauts. No one's been able to definitively figure out where these signals came from. Were they just random radio waves bouncing off space debris, or something more mysterious? NASA has always been pretty dismissive about it, and sure, maybe it was nothing. It's also very possible they just had no explanation. Over the years, there have been tons of photos of the lunar surface taken by the Apollo missions. Well, some folks have pointed out some rather strange things in some of these images, bizarre formations. Images that appear to show what look like pyramids, domes, or even straight lines in the soil. NASA has always insisted these are just optical illusions, products of shadows or rocky outcrops that we just misidentify, but a lot of these formations have sharp angles and their symmetry just seems so precise. It really makes you wonder if they could have been built intentionally. And if that is the case, then what's the deal? Why are they there? Were they built by some ancient civilization that used to live on the moon? That would be pretty cool, definitely something worth looking into. So why hasn't NASA done anything to explore these supposed structures in more detail? Well, maybe there's nothing there, or maybe they're just hiding something from us. Astronomers and conspiracy theorists have pored over Apollo mission photos, and some believe that these structures are evidence of something much larger than what we're being told. But we might find out more in the very near future, with the Artemis 3 mission on the horizon, set to be the first crewed lunar landing since Apollo 17 in 1972. But was Apollo 17 really the last time astronauts set foot on the moon? Next we have Apollo 20. Wasn't Apollo 20 cancelled? Well, let's explore that for a minute. For decades there's been a rumor that the Apollo program continued long after Apollo 17. Some conspiracy theorists believe that Apollo 20 actually did happen and that they allegedly flew to the moon in the late 70s. The mission, of course, wasn't made public. It was a secret operation. But why? Well, because there was something up there that needed to be explored further, but they didn't want to reveal anything to the public in fear of causing panic. Supposedly, during this mission, astronauts were studying evidence of alien contact on the moon. They allegedly discovered this huge abandoned spacecraft in some sort of base or outpost that appeared to be much older than any human structures. The astronauts reportedly even brought back alien artifacts. But the craziest part is that, so the story goes, they also found the bodies of 2 extraterrestrials in the craft, one of which they dubbed the Mona Lisa. NASA has, of course, never acknowledged this. One of the most popular theories surrounding the moon is that it's hollow. The theory became widely known after the Apollo missions, when astronauts during Apollo 12 dropped a large object onto the surface to test the moon's seismic activity. They reported this strange ringing sound. Apparently the moon rang like a bell for over an hour, as if it were hollow inside. NASA has explained this by claiming that the moon's internal structure is just different from Earth's, to dumb it down significantly, but some people still find this strange. The explanation doesn't really account for the ringing that was recorded. One article from 1970 even described it sounding almost like a gong. So what the hell happened? Could it really be that the moon has a hollow core? There are even conspiracies that the moon was placed there intentionally and is some kind of artificial object. This hollow theory has never been properly investigated, at least not that we know of. But this isn't the only sign that the moon could be hollow, or at least partially hollow. So this is a more recent one. Scientists working with China's Chang'e 4 mission had been studying the far side of the moon, and they found something interesting beneath the surface. Using ground-penetrating radar, they detected strange echoes, as if there were hollowed out sections underground. Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I will make quite a leap here. Does this mean there could be hidden underground structures on the moon? Well, maybe, but what's a lot more likely is that at the very least, there could be tunnels or lava tubes down there, and that's pretty cool because tunnels could be very beneficial for future moon missions. For example, lava tubes could protect astronauts from the moon's extreme temperature swings and radiation from space. On the surface, temperatures fluctuate. During the day, it can be 250 degrees Fahrenheit or 121 Celsius, and at night, it can drop all the way down to minus 280 Fahrenheit or minus 133 Celsius. That's just an unhinged fluctuation in temperature. Underground though, things are a lot more stable. So setting up shop underground would be a much better bet. And if there are already hollowed out sections, much easier. Setting up base in a natural underground structure rather than building everything from scratch is ideal, especially when you're going to transport everything out to, the moon. Imagine lugging a huge drill up into space.
But on to number 5. Is there a graveyard on the moon? Among the space junk and other mementos left on that big ball of cheese in the sky, there's another guy. A dead legendary planetary geologist to be more precise. On January 6th, 1998, Eugene Shoemaker, the man, the planetary geologist, the legend, was launched in a memorial capsule aboard Lunar Prospector to the moon. And the man had it done in style, let me say. Around the capsule was a piece of brass foil inscribed with an image of a comet Hale-Bopp and an image of meteor crater in northern Arizona. And how could I forget? A passage from William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And which one, you may be asking? And oh, you don't have to ask twice. Or ask at all. I'll say it for you. It read, "And when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun." I think the guy kind of liked the moon, but it's nice. But anyways, you're welcome. If you're not shook, get ready for the next one. This one is number 4. Moonquakes? So astronauts be tripping. Seriously, NASA has footage in the archives from the Apollo missions of the 1970s, and astronauts were stumbling around. But why? Maybe moonquakes. Over the 5 years astronauts left seismic sensors on the moon, they recorded evidence of more than 12,000 moonquakes. And a heads up, while our earthquakes typically last under a minute, a moonquake can last an afternoon and often will last over an hour. They last longer because the moon doesn't have large bodies of water to combat the seismic vibrations like the Earth does. So if you're hoping to run away to the moon to get away from the natural disasters that happen on Earth, then you are not going to find that escape on the moon. I'm so sorry, because the moon is shook, fam. That was cringy, I'm so sorry, but we must continue on. On to number 3, the lunar lava tube, or many lunar lava tubes. So there's tunnels on the moon too. Maybe the moon could be a large organic space rock adapted to be an alien spaceship, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. These tunnels I'm talking about are an underground network of lava tubes, or pits on the surface of the moon, that are entrances to underground tunnels that were once filled with lava. A Japanese probe even found a cave 30 miles long and 60 miles wide. So there are unexplored tunnels on the moon. These could hold subsurface ice and therefore water, which is a super important resource that, if discovered, could be used by astronauts during future missions. So I'm thinking kind of a fun place to hold a party. A search party, of course, but a party. So on to number 2, moon dust. Okay, so in the last video, it was brought up that people think that the moon rocks brought back from the lunar surface were fake. This time, let's get more detailed, a little more nitty gritty. Let's talk dust. In 1972, while there for Apollo 17, astronaut Harrison Schmitt sneezed. Then, for a full day, he got described as what he said was a lunar hay fever. That's what he got. His eyes watered, his throat throbbed, and he broke into sneezing fits. But why? He's another one who bit the dust. Just kidding. He's the only one who inhaled the dust, moon dust, which is very dangerous. Moon dust isn't like the dust here on Earth. The particles on the moon are sharp, never erode, and are mainly made up of meteorite pieces. NASA tested a fake version of moon soil and its effect when human cells are exposed to it, and the easily inhalable dust sliced and destroyed up to 90% of lung and brain tissue within 24 hours. Fun. So what about our buddy Harrison Schmitt? Good news for him is that he only took one breath after tracking some moon dirt from coming inside the spaceship, so he's all good and still alive today. But we should all be careful if we want to explore the tunnels in the moon. The moonquakes could really shake loose some of those dangerous particles, so suits will have to be real tight. But let's get into, lastly, number 1, moon warming. Another reason suits have to be tightly sealed: to regulate temperature. The moon doesn't share the same temperature as the Earth, as it can vary from minus 173 degrees Celsius all the way to 127 degrees Celsius, or minus 230 degrees Fahrenheit and up to 260 degrees Fahrenheit. Whichever way you measure it, it's a big, distance apart from what we have here on Earth. The thing is, the temperature also changed a lot right after the astronauts landed. The moon's surface temperature went up nearly 4 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius. After moon dust gave Schmitt the fever, well, were people giving the moon the fever right back? Probably not. The real reason was probably one that came up in a study in the Journal of Geophysical Research. To sum it up, this story basically said that the 12 Apollo astronauts that walked on the moon kicked up a lot of dirt, and this uncovered a darker soil underneath, and the more heat-absorbing soil that was now uncovered then absorbed enough solar radiation to raise the temperature of the entire moon surface. Like, have you ever sat on a turf field and felt that it was just so hot? It's because the crumb rubber turf retains the heat much more than regular grass. The dark moon soil is just another thing that you don't want to lay down on a sweltering day. It retains so much heat. So other than that, we basically warmed the moon. Just a tad, just a little bit.
Speaking of the hollow moon and hidden structures, a recent paper from Harvard University's Human Flourishing program came out with a pretty wild idea, that there might indeed be an alien base hidden on the moon. The study proposed that this base could house spacecraft designed for quick trips to Earth. The idea is that extraterrestrials could be using these ships to come here for research or who knows what else. Now, of course, we've all heard ideas like this before. But it is interesting that this came out of Harvard, not just some random dude on Reddit. The research also ties into the growing number of UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon sightings, that are being reported more lately. With more and more of these reports of strange objects in the sky, the idea that an alien base could be hidden on the moon starts to sound a little less ludicrous. If extraterrestrials are really this close, it could explain why we're seeing so much stuff in the sky these days. Many astronauts have reported seeing strange glowing spots or lights on the surface of the moon. These aren't just simple reflections or optical illusions, but bright, unexplained glows that appear to move or change shape. Some of these glows were reported during Apollo missions, but they've also been seen by people on Earth looking at the moon through powerful telescopes. NASA has mostly dismissed these reports as either solar reflection or lunar gas emissions, but could there be something else going on? The lights are often seen in areas where there shouldn't be any reflective material. And it's especially odd when they show up near particularly large craters, because, maybe there's something built into those craters. So what could these strange glows be? Are they evidence of alien technology? Are people just overthinking things? Go ahead and make fun of me down in the comments. Next up, we have cryptoterrestrials. What on earth is a cryptoterrestrial, you ask? Well, the term was actually coined in that same Harvard paper that I mentioned before. The term cryptoterrestrial is used to describe the beings that could be living on the moon or even right here on Earth. The paper lays out 4 theories about what these cryptoterrestrials might be. The first theory is called human cryptoterrestrials. This one suggests that a super advanced human civilization once existed a long time ago. It was almost entirely wiped out by some kind of disaster, like a massive flood. But some survivors of this ancient civilization might still be around, living secretly among us. Next is the hominid or theropod cryptoterrestrial theory. This is a non-human species, something like a descendant of apes or dinosaurs that evolved to become highly advanced but chose to live in hiding, possibly underground. This idea kind of touches on cryptids like Bigfoot or creatures similar to ancient theropods. The third theory is what's referred to as former extraterrestrial or extratemporal cryptoterrestrials. This is really just a fancy way of describing your standard alien beings who have traveled to Earth from another planet or possibly even another dimension. But there's one more type of cryptoterrestrial, the magical cryptoterrestrial, which is exactly what it sounds like, mystical or magical beings. Not going to get into that in this video, it just doesn't really fit the vibe. One of the craziest theories about the moon is that it isn't natural. I did not come up with this idea on my own. There are some theorists who argue that the moon could be an artificial satellite put into orbit around Earth by some advanced civilization. The theory is based on some strange facts about the moon, mainly its size, its unusual composition, and its position relative to Earth and the sun. The moon is perfectly positioned to cover the sun during an eclipse, and its size in relation to Earth and the sun is so precise that it seems, to some, too perfect to be a coincidence. These folks argue that the moon's perfect balance in the sky is proof that it must have been placed there intentionally, and the fact that the moon has such a mysterious composition, different from Earth's in ways that don't seem to make much sense, also adds to this. Now, I don't find this one very convincing. I mean, sure, it's amazing that the moon is so perfectly placed and all, but we only think it's perfect because everything we know revolves around what is, if that makes sense. Yes, life would be drastically different on Earth if there was no moon, but the universe is vast, possibly endless, so the range of possibilities for the placement of planets and moons, it just makes it mathematically likely that there would be a planet with a moon and sun like ours. But, I mean, hey, is it possible it's artificial? I guess, sure. And finally, we have the secret footage. During the Apollo 11 mission, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history, becoming the first humans to walk on the moon. But some conspiracy theorists believe that NASA is hiding footage of the mission. Footage that's never been shown to the public. But why? Well, the idea is that this footage contains evidence of alien activity on the moon, or strange structures that were spotted in the background and then quickly cut from the televised feed. NASA has acknowledged that much of the original Apollo 11 footage was recorded over because of a tape shortage, but many people are skeptical. Why were the tapes of the most significant event in human history just erased? Some think that the supposed lost footage could have contained something that was too shocking for the public at the time. Could it be that the astronauts captured something extraterrestrial during their time on the moon, something that NASA is still trying to keep quiet? Let us know your thoughts down below. The circumstances of the mission make a hoax highly plausible. In the midst of a Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, showing who was more technologically advanced was paramount. So either side had every intention of coming out on top. For a powerful nation like the United States, this could have given the government all the motivation they needed to force results by pulling one of the oldest tricks in the book, good old-fashioned hoax. When worst comes to worst, just trick them. I mean, hey, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Now, of course, there's no way we can confirm or deny this 100%, but I wanted to start with this point because now we're going to take a look at some more specific details and sort this whole thing out once and for all. In at number 9, we have one of the most common critiques of the Apollo moon landing footage and photographs, the lack of stars. Not just lack of, actually, there are no stars to be seen, just a flat black background. Now, we've all looked up at the night sky and seen the endless cluster of stars above, especially those of us who don't live in big cities. The sky is filled with the things. So how is it that these astronauts who are all the way up in space on the surface of the moon itself didn't capture any stars in their footage? Now, you may be thinking, well, even if it is a hoax, they could have still put stars in the background, so this doesn't really prove anything, but I'm not so sure. The endless void of space coated in twinkling stars would be a pretty difficult image to replicate, especially in 1969. So perhaps they opted to just leave them out altogether in hopes that no one would notice. But we noticed. I noticed. Perhaps you did too. Discrepancies in the shadows. There were lots of photographs and footage taken on the moon. Of course there was. I mean, how could you not, right? And as spectacular as many people thought these images were, there were some eagle-eyed skeptics like me who noticed something odd in regards to the shadows being cast on the surface of the moon. The lengths and angles of the shadows were varied. Now, this may not sound too strange at first. This is something we observe all the time. But here on Earth, where most of us lived, we often have multiple light sources at play. We got lamps, we have lights on the ceiling, we have candles at times, salt lamps, and of course, studio lighting. I have some studio lighting shining right at my face as we speak, and all of these different sources of light create variations in shadows. But on the moon, there's only one source of light, baby. The sun. So why were the shadows not symmetrical? Well, once again, perhaps they weren't really on the moon. Maybe in the next studio over, an episode of Star Trek was being filmed, which had actually finished shooting by the time they landed on the moon, but you get my point. The waving American flag. Once Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong had successfully landed on the moon, they planted the American flag into the rocky terrain. It was a glorious representation of America's first place victory in the race to space. Everybody clapped, unless you were, of course, living in the Soviet Union. Perhaps then, maybe you shed a tear. And the dreams of children across the world had finally come true. One day, maybe they too could take a trip to space, they all thought. But some skeptical viewers once again saw something fishy in the footage. Flags. Flags are known to blow in the wind. That's kind of why they're made the way they are. Things look cool when they blow gloriously in the wind. Only there's just one problem. There is no wind in the vacuum of space. So it seems odd to me that the flag would be blowing as if it were perched on a porch by a seaside town. It's been said that it was set up specifically to create the illusion of blowing in the wind, but to that I say, possibly, but possibly not. It's amazing what kinds of excuses people will make when they're caught red-handed making silly mistakes. Alright, still a firm believer in the moon landing being real? Well, let me throw another monkey wrench into your beliefs. In one famous photo taken of Buzz Aldrin, we see Neil Armstrong in the reflection of his visor. Now, any reflection is going to show exactly what's right in front of it. So why is it that there doesn't seem to be a camera in Armstrong's hands? Perhaps someone else took the picture, but it was said there were only 2 of them there. So once again, I cross my arms in disbelief, sir. This one has been apparently explained by NASA, saying that Armstrong had a camera mounted in the front of his suit, but I still don't see it. Where is the camera? Hashtag, where is the camera? I want to know. Maybe NASA is refusing to admit that there was a whole studio crew involved in this so-called mission. And speaking of a studio crew.
Alright, number 10. Is it a space station? I thought I'd start this one off with a comment that inspired me off the last video. YouTube user Darth Elias, I believe, commented that that's no moon, it's a space station on the last video, so I looked into it. and unfortunately, not much came up. While a space station on or in the moon might be an interesting idea, it's not the current reality. There is an international space station orbiting Earth that gathers some really cool data though, so yeah, maybe they'll move it to the moon. But I really like where your head's at, and there's a little more information on a similar theory, which brings us into number 9. It's an alien spaceship. Space station, spaceship, spacecraft, they are all similar, right? On the same wavelength, at least. So, have aliens been living inside the moon this entire time? Let's crack into it. Okay. An article titled, "Is the Moon a Creation of Alien Intelligence?" came out in a Soviet magazine called Sputnik in 1970. This article was written by Michael Vasek and Alexander Sherbakov from what was then known as the Soviet Academy of Sciences, now known as the Russian Academy of Sciences. They think that under a rocky layer of the moon there is an armored hull protecting the spacecraft housing unknown beings. People who believe this theory cite that the moon rang like a bell when it was landed on, which was a true quote. This comes from an article in Popular Science where it said the moon rang like a bell for an hour after the Apollo 12 deliberately crashed its ascent stage of its lunar module. People have used this descriptor to allege that, hey, a bell is hollow and it rings, wouldn't the moon be hollow if it rings too? Plus, the moon isn't as dense as the Earth. It's 3.3 grams per centimeter cubed, whereas Earth is 5.5 grams per centimeter cubed. So, is it a space station? Well, the thing is, it can't maintain its mass and gravitational field without a dense core, so only if the aliens have a super dense core, then maybe. Now on to number 8. Lunatics. Well, this isn't on the moon, it's some scary stuff about the moon's possible influence. I know my mom tells me more weird things happen around full moons than usual, and she blames it for a bunch of stuff, and I've heard a lot of people do it too. In the Middle Ages, scientists and philosophers thought a full moon caused unusual behavior as well. The unusual behavior they thought it caused though, they thought it caused things as serious as seizures, fever, and rheumatism. If I lost you on rheumatism, don't worry, I looked it up too, and those who already know, don't rub it in, okay? Rheumatism is any disease marked by inflammation and pain in the joints, muscles, or fibrous tissue, especially rheumatoid arthritis. So yeah, scientists and philosophers thought that the moon did this. Seriously. And they even had a name for the people under the influence of a full moon. Lunatics. Surprise, that's where the word comes from. Break it down. Luna, the Latin word for moon. Yeah, some more Latin. Ex luna scientia. From the moon. Knowledge. Or from the moon. Rheumatoid arthritis. You decide. On to number 7. Space trash. So it's scary that our world is filling up with trash faster than we can find places for it, but newsflash, there's also trash on the moon. Most likely upwards of 400,000 pounds of it too. Most of it is old lunar probes or other spaceships that were built just to see if they could land on the surface, but also lunar orbiters that crashed into the surface. This is starting to sound more messy than my room. Their excuse for not cleaning up is that they can study to see how the materials weather over time, as the moon's surface is an environment unlike ours. But if I use that excuse, my roommates call me a lunatic. Ayy. On to number 6. Space snakes. A NASA astronaut who has been on 6 space flights says he has seen space snakes. Dr. Story Musgrave, a man with 6 academic degrees, says he saw things that he couldn't explain properly. He said in a 1994 interview that on 2 of his missions he saw a snake out there. He describes it as 6 to 8 feet long, rubbery, with internal waves in it, and that it follows you for a rather long period of time. He thinks there are a bunch of different creatures out there in the great expanse of space, so if you thought snakes on a plane was something, well, honey, you got a big storm coming, honestly.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Mystery House. This is a pretty recent weird discovery that was made in November of last year by the China National Space Administration rover Yutu-2. This rover travels around the far side of the moon, exploring and giving us insights into what lies beyond our point of view. This rover has been traveling through the 186-kilometer wide Von Karman crater, and this is when the rover ended up spotting what appeared to be a sort of cube-shaped unidentified object, which is now being referred to as a mystery house. The rover is now on its way to investigate further, but we don't yet quite have the answers to this mystery. When the mystery house was first spotted, it wasn't exactly far from the rover, as it was only 80 meters away, but that does not mean the rover can get there quickly. The approach for this rover is expected to take somewhere from 2 to 3 lunar days, which is about 2 to 3 months in Earth time. This is because the rover moves quite slowly, and the path to explore this cube object is not a clear one. While we patiently wait for the answers, we can always speculate. Drop a comment down below with your best guesses, and who knows, maybe we'll come up with the next viral conspiracy theory. In our number 9 spot today, we have the green gel, another discovery that was made by the Yutu-2 rover, which first made its lunar landing in February of 2019, came in August of that year. On Lunar Day 8, which began on July 25th, the rover was doing its thing, finding its way through an area that was filled with a bunch of small impact craters. On July 28th, as the team here on Earth was preparing to power down the rover for its little midday nap, which is meant to protect the machine from high temperatures and radiation from the sun, which, if you take away all that scary space stuff, sounds like the cutest little thing ever, a little rover nap. But anyway, as this thing's getting ready for its little rover nap, one member on the team was checking over some images that were taken by the rover's main camera, and that's when they spotted a small crater that seemed like it contained some sort of material that had a color and a sort of luster that was significantly different from the lunar area surrounding it. The team then changed the plans they had for the rover and decided that instead of going west, which was next on the schedule, they instead would take a little detour to go and check out this mystery material. The rover carefully made its way over to the crater and examined it with both its visible and near-infrared spectrometer, which is a thing that detects lights that are scattered or reflected off of material, which helps to reveal what they're made up of. For a while, no one knew exactly what the substance was, and it was only being described as being gel-like and being a weird color, but after almost a year of more research, it was finally identified. It's rock! More specifically, rock that was melted together, most likely in the heat of impact from a meteorite. It's insane that something like that created a dark green glistening impact melt, but it's also very cool. I'm just glad we got down to the bottom of this mystery. In our number 8 spot today, we have orange colored moon. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. This wasn't exactly found on the far side of the moon. I know, I get it, you're upset, but I just truly thought it was so cool. I really wanted to share it with you guys, so bear with me. All the way back in 1972, Apollo 17 astronaut and geologist Harrison Schmitt was exploring around the Taurus Littrow landing site when he stumbled upon some orange-colored soil. It was a completely unexpected find, and one that they weren't quite sure about. What was causing this soil to get its orange color, and why was it different from all the other soil around it? Luckily, especially since it's been so long, they've been able to look more into it, and there are actually some answers to this moon mystery. After more research, lunar geologists were able to conclude that the orange soil happened as a result of an explosive volcanic eruption that occurred over 3.64 billion years ago. That's so cool! This orange soil exists because of molten drops spraying out from an awesome lunar volcanic eruption billions of years ago. Space never fails to absolutely amaze me. I'm starting to think that geologists have the coolest job in the world, by the way. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Tsiolkovsky crater. This is obviously a crater, and it has been named after the Russian scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. It was originally discovered on photographs that were sent back to Earth from the Russian spacecraft Luna 3. This crater is a large impact crater that lies in the southern hemisphere, but you might be sitting there thinking, there's a lot of craters on the moon, so what makes this one so special? Well, this crater is actually one of the most important figures found on the far side of the moon because it has a complex central peak and a smooth, lava-flooded floor on top of a few other interesting geographical features that make it a very exciting and important place for future lunar exploration. In our number 6 spot today, we have reflections. Like I mentioned before, for a long time it was widely believed that the far side of the moon was referred to as the dark side of the moon because it didn't receive any sunlight, rather than the truth, which is that the name is only to suggest that it's the side we know little about because we can't see it. That is why this discovery was a bit of a shock to some people. Not only is the far side of the moon not dark and does receive sunlight, but the far side of the moon actually reflects more light than our near side. This is because the side that we see has these incredibly dark, smooth, low-lying plains that are from ancient seas of molten magma that were on the moon, and while this is incredibly fascinating, it doesn't really reflect light very well. And while the far side reflects light better, it's still not that great. The moon is significantly darker than it appears to us, with most of the surface being a color closer to that of asphalt. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Sea of Moscow. This is a lunar mar that is one of the very few that sit on the far side of the moon, which is exactly what makes it so fascinating, as well as the fact that we aren't exactly sure of its origins. Just so we're all on the same page, lunar mar is the large, dark basaltic plains that are located on the moon. The basaltic plains are of course made up of basalt, which is a result of the rapid cooling of low viscosity lava that is rich in magnesium and iron that is at the surface or very near to the surface, and this appears both on the Earth and on the moon. For a while it was believed that this was formed due to some ancient volcanic eruption, but there is also speculation that it may have been from a meteorite cluster impact instead. Either way, whichever is responsible for this lunar mar, the moon sure was having a very stressful time.
One of the oldest moon conspiracies is that NASA's been secretly editing out weird stuff from their photos, especially from the far side. People have claimed that certain images in NASA's public archive used to show towers, domes, these massive shadows, until the high-res versions mysteriously disappeared or were replaced. In the early 2000s, a bunch of online forums blew up over one particular image, AS11385564, taken during Apollo 11. It allegedly showed a huge, unnatural structure near a crater edge, but when people went back to download it later, the image was blurry, or it was just gone. Same thing happened with several far-side images from the lunar orbiter missions. There's also a theory that before the public ever saw these photos, a secret team went through them and cleaned up anything that looked too strange. That's how the term airbrushed by NASA got started. Now, is it possible these are just glitches, compression issues, lighting tricks? Sure. But when multiple versions of the same image start vanishing or getting downgraded, it's not hard to see why some people think something's being covered up. So here's one of the more out there theories, but it's been floating around for decades. Some people genuinely believe there's an alien base hidden on the far side of the moon, and that's why NASA stopped going back. So the idea here is that the side of the moon we never see was the perfect place for something to hide. One guy named Carl Wolf, who used to work in an Air Force photo lab in the 60s, claimed that he saw classified lunar images that showed massive towers, domes, and what looked like radar dishes. Another former Army guy, Bob Dean, backed him up, saying, "We've known about non-human structures on the moon for years." There's never been any solid proof, obviously, but their claims still get dragged up in UFO circles to this day. The theory goes even deeper, saying the Apollo missions were more about reconnaissance than science and exploration. Supposedly, we made contact, got warned off, and haven't been back since. NASA's official reason for not returning is budget cuts, but for the people who believe this stuff, that explanation doesn't hold up, especially when you consider how obsessed we've been with Mars and how quiet it's been about the moon over the years. In 2019, China's Yutu-2 rover rolled into a tiny crater on the far side of the moon and spotted something that made scientists a little confused. It was this weird, shiny, greenish blob, described as kinda gel-like. Now the moon is dry and dusty though, so what the hell was a green gel doing there? The Chinese team was so confused they paused everything and went back for a closer look, and it turns out it wasn't actual gel. It was actually probably rock that had been melted by a meteor impact, basically glassy material formed in the heat, but this was still totally unexpected. It was sitting inside a crater, it had a glossy sheen and reflected light in a way that made it really stand out against the matte gray surroundings. Some people online ran with wild theories about it being alien goop, fuel leaks from some buried craft, even that it was some sort of life form that liquefied under sunlight. And even though scientists gave a reasonable explanation, the fact that the rover crew didn't recognize it at first is still pretty cool, because what else could be out there that we haven't discovered yet, especially below the surface? There's this crater on the far side of the moon called Paracelsus C, and it's been causing a stir for years, mainly because of weird shadows and shapes inside it that don't really look natural. In 2016, an image analyst named Mark Carlotto said he spotted weird shapes inside the crater, stuff that didn't look natural. Using top-down images from NASA's own Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, he pointed out what looked like long corridors, tower-like objects, and what he called a massive platform. The shapes are aligned at 90-degree angles, kind of like buildings or tunnels. Now, to be clear, NASA never acknowledged any of this as real. The official explanation is that shadows and low-res photos can trick your eyes. Pareidolia, all that. But this isn't just one random blurry photo. Multiple images show the same stuff from different angles, and the crater is hard to see from Earth. There's a spot on the far side of the moon that totally stands out when scientists scan for radioactive material, especially thorium. It's known as the Compton-Belkovich anomaly, and it doesn't match anything else on the moon. Most of the surface is flat, dry, and let's face it, it's pretty boring. But this place has signs of something different going on underneath. When NASA mapped out the surface using special sensors, this one zone lit up with way more thorium than anywhere else. That's unusual, because thorium is pretty rare on the moon. What really makes it strange is the shape of the ground there. Instead of the usual craters and flat plains, the surface is all lumpy and raised, like something pushed up from below. That's usually what happens when magma rises and hardens, so scientists think this spot might have had some kind of underground eruption a long time ago, which is odd because that kind of activity wasn't supposed to happen on this side of the moon.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the crust. Remember how people used to believe that there was a face on the moon? Well, that was thanks to that lunar mar we just talked about. So while the Sea of Moscow and things sort of similar do exist on the far side of the moon, there really isn't a lot of Maria on the side that we can't see. What was called the lunar far side highlands problem became a thing of human interest in 1959 when that Soviet Luna 3 was able to send the first images of the dark side of the moon all the way back to Earth. On the side of the moon we can see, the near side, we see a lot of variation in coloring, and that is due to this Maria. This knowledge is what led to scientists being shocked when they first saw the other side. The far side, because the far side doesn't look the same as the near side at all. While a lot of the near side is Maria, the far side is mostly mountains and craters, and this led to the question and mystery of why. For 55 years this question plagued researchers, but now we think we may have an answer. Scientists realized that this difference and the reason for the lack of Maria might just be due to the difference in the crustal thickness of the side of the moon we can see and the far side, and this is just the consequence of how the moon originally formed. The most widely accepted answer of how the moon formed is the idea of some sort of Mars-size object slamming into Earth shortly after the planet came into existence, and this gigantic impact flung a bunch of stuff out into space, and this would eventually form our moon. That's like the very basis of the theory. So after this impact, the moon and Earth were both super hot, like so hot that parts of them vaporized, which created a disk of rock, magma, and vapor found around the Earth. Then, since the moon is smaller, it cooled faster, but the moon used to be like 20 times closer to us than it is now, so the far side of the moon cooled faster than the near side, and this created a difference in temperature between the two halves, which then led to impact the crustal formation on the moon. That was a lot of info, but how crazy is that? I always find it so interesting to learn about how each and every step in the formation of our solar system has affected the way things are in ways we don't even really fully realize. In our number 3 spot today, we have craters. Okay, so now we know about why one side has more Maria, but now why does the far side have more craters than the near side? For a while, people thought this was because the Earth was acting as a sort of shield for the moon, but we now know that that is not true. The Earth only obscures about 4 square degrees out of 41,000 square degrees of the sky that can be seen from the moon, so obviously this means that the Earth is actually a terrible shield for the moon. This is what led researchers to believe that lava flows are more likely responsible, and this definitely goes back to the crust as well and the origins of the moon that we just discussed. The crust of the moon mostly consists of plagioclases, which were formed when aluminum and calcium condensed and combined with silicates in the mantle of the moon. Like we talked about earlier, since the far side was, well, further from the super hot, slower cooling Earth side after that big impact, these elements cooled sooner and the crust that formed was thicker. So when meteor impacts happened on the near side of the moon, there was a more likely chance of them cracking into the thinner crust, which then releases the basaltic lava. But on the far side of the moon, the thicker crust puts up much more of a fight, and now the moon is just left with these cool battle scars. In our number 2 spot today, we have the South Pole Aitken Basin. Speaking of craters on the far side of the moon, this one is an immense impact one. Measured to be roughly 2,500 kilometers in diameter and between 5.2 to 8.2 kilometers deep, this is one of the largest known impact craters in our entire solar system. That is no easy feat and definitely means that the moon has seen its fair share of cosmic disturbances. This basin is not only the largest and deepest on the moon, but it is also the oldest. While this is located on the far side of the moon, apparently just the outer rim of the basin can be seen from Earth, and this is due to the huge mountain chain that is called the Leibniz Mountains. Remember those missions launched by the CNSA that we started this list off with? Well, one of their spacecrafts actually landed in this basin in 2019 and began to explore all around it, which means that all it has to offer is soon to be uncovered. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Eastern Sea. This is a lunar mare that is located on the western border of the near side and far side of the moon and is partially visible, but pretty difficult to see from Earth. What is so cool about this one is the way it shows up on lunar images, kind of like a target ring bullseye. It is believed that this is an impact crater that was caused by an asteroid-sized object, estimated to be around 64 kilometers in diameter, traveling at speeds of around a calm, casual 15 kilometers per second. This collision is said to have caused ripples in the lunar crust, which is what gives it that ring effect. At the moment, we don't have samples directly from this area, so we aren't sure what the exact age is yet, but it is thought to be the moon's most recent or youngest impact basin, thought to be quite a bit younger than the Imbrium basin, which is about 3.85 billion years old.
The moon has these super weird bright squiggly lines across parts of it called lunar swirls. They look like someone airbrushed giant white tattoos onto the ground. One of the biggest is called Reiner Gamma, but there's no crater, no impact site, nothing to explain why these things are there. And they show up on the far side too. Interestingly, they match up with magnetic anomalies, random spots where the moon has a weird magnetic field. The moon isn't supposed to have a strong magnetic field anymore, so where is this coming from? And then there's the phantom lights. For decades, astronomers have reported brief flashes and glows coming from certain parts of the moon. They're called TLPs, which stands for transient lunar phenomena, and they've been caught on camera more than once. They blink, flare up, they vanish in seconds. Scientists have thrown out theories like gas leaks, solar flares, or moonquakes, kicking up reflective dust, but none of it really sticks. These things don't make much sense. They don't seem to be caused by impacts or anything obvious. Most impact craters look like, well, craters. Messy, uneven, jagged, but a bunch of craters on the moon, especially on the far side, are almost perfectly circular, no matter the angle the object hit from. That's already a bit weird, but what's even stranger is what's going on under them. NASA discovered these things called mascons, short for mass concentrations. They're basically hidden blobs of extra gravity underneath the surface. When satellites fly over them, their paths get slightly pulled or tilted, which is how they were discovered. NASA engineers had to account for these when planning Apollo landings, because they could mess with orbit paths. And the mascons didn't always line up with things you can actually see on the surface, like mountains and craters. Of course, there are conspiracies that talk about how there might be buried technology down there that explains the mysterious pull. During the Apollo 12 mission, NASA purposely crashed a piece of the lunar module onto the surface. What happened next freaked some people out. The moon literally rang. Seismic sensors planted nearby picked up vibrations that lasted for nearly an hour. It echoed like a bell. Now, the scientific explanation is that the inside of the moon is super dry and rigid, which makes shockwaves bounce around for longer than they would on Earth. But to a lot of people, it sounded a little too weird. It kicked off a whole wave of theories that the moon might be hollow, or at least has massive empty chambers inside it. Some even took it further, claiming the moon is entirely artificial. A few researchers have pushed the idea that it's not a moon at all, but some kind of ancient alien craft or satellite. In the last few years, scans of the moon have picked up weird heat signals underground, random spots that are way warmer than they should be. Some of them are around old craters, and in a few places there's even salt buried deep down below the surface, which is kind of strange for a place with no water. Scientists say it could be old lava pockets that haven't cooled off yet, or maybe some radioactive material giving off heat, but the moon's been dead for billions of years, so how could there still be anything warm down there? If the heat's not coming from a natural source, then what is it? Could there be something artificial buried underground, something that's still active? There's no proof of that, obviously, but the fact that we're even seeing unexpected heat at all is enough to make you wonder. And it's not just one hotspot, there are a bunch of these scattered across the far side. And speaking of stuff buried deep under the moon, China's Yutu-2 rover, which landed on the far side of the moon in 2019, has ground-penetrating radar that basically lets it see beneath the surface in a sense, and what it picked up was weird. Instead of just solid rock, it found multiple layers of different materials stacked underneath. Dust, broken rocks, possibly ancient lava flows and voids that don't quite match what scientists expected. In total, they found at least 5 separate layers going down about 40 meters. Some of it looks like debris from impacts. Other parts seem more structured, like the ground was built up or shaped over time. And the deeper they scanned, the more complex it got. Now, this doesn't mean alien bases or even like tunnels, but it does mean the far side of the moon has way more going on underground than anyone thought. And because Yutu-2 is the first rover to explore that side, we're only just starting to figure out what's really buried there. Well, we gotta start off with what everyone kinda hopes to be the case. Aliens. Either aliens that pose a threat to our safety that we wanna stay away from, or aliens that the government wants to cover up. One theory is that during Apollo missions, astronauts encountered extraterrestrial beings or evidence of their existence on the moon. And if that is true, it's pretty awesome for one, but would also have some pretty serious implications for humanity. Implications that NASA and the government may have figured we just weren't ready for yet. Some believe that governments and space agencies have deliberately kept this information from the public to avoid widespread panic. They may have also found advanced technology on the moon they didn't want falling into the wrong hands. There have been testimonies from former astronauts hinting at unexplained encounters, and that's not even mentioning all the supposed whistleblower accounts about secretive government operations with extraterrestrials here on Earth. So the fear of exposing such a big secret may be one reason why astronauts haven't returned to the moon in such a long time. If we really do end up returning in 2026 though, maybe some secrets will finally be revealed, but sadly, I doubt it. So, speaking of the possibility of strange structures on the moon and possible alien encounters, enter Scott Waring. Scott Waring, an enthusiast in all things extraterrestrial, has posted tons of videos and images of things he's spotted in images and videos, including stuff on the moon. He's posted tons of videos on YouTube where he zooms in on lunar craters, pointing out strange shapes that he insists don't fit the bill as just natural rock formations. He thinks they look like structures or even spacecraft. One of his finds is a curious formation in the Zeeman crater on the far side of the moon. It looks to be a rectangular type of shape, almost too perfect to be anything but artificial, according to him anyway. Waring and other conspiracy theorists have speculated that it could be an entrance to an underground alien base. Kind of see looks like steps there, right? Waring also alleges that some of these structures he's identified mysteriously vanish from future scans of Google Moon, making him think things are being covered up. Either the images are getting scrubbed from Google, or the objects are mobile in some way and are just flying away or like closing up. But are these just cases of the human brain perceiving familiar patterns or shapes where none actually exist? I gotta say, in most of these cases, I think so. I do believe there are aliens out there. I also think there's a high probability they've interacted with us, but I'm not too sure they have bases set up on the moon. But what do you guys think? Let's talk more about mysterious objects and structures on the moon. Anyway though, maybe you'll be convinced. Could astronauts have come across alien structures or artifacts on the moon in previous missions? Remnants of some ancient civilization or evidence of extraterrestrial activity up there? There have been other anomalies captured in photographs from the Apollo missions. Unusual shapes and formations that look to be artificial rather than natural. Again, if stuff like this was found, governments and space agencies might be hesitant about returning to the moon out of fear of what they might find. Uncovering evidence of past or present extraterrestrial civilizations could be dangerous. We may just not want to poke the bear until we're ready to deal with it, which is why we haven't had a plan in motion to return until now. One example of odd structures on the moon is this image here, which was taken on an Apollo mission. Formation is often referred to as the castle. This is probably the image that got most people thinking about possible alien structures on the moon. It does kind of look like three pillars or columns holding up what looks to be a tower. And what's intriguing is that this structure looks brighter than its surroundings. So again, what do you think? Is this just a trick of the light, or could it be something more? Here's a weird one. So anyone a fan here of mystery goo? Feel like that's something you want to mess with? No? Well, apparently there's some on the moon. China's U-2 rover, part of the Chang'e 4 mission, made a strange discovery on the far side of the moon. It was a weird jelly-like substance. This strange material was found inside a small crater called von Karman, and it looked different from the usual dusty lunar soil surrounding it. The rover stumbled on it when it was busy exploring the moon's surface using its visible and near-infrared spectrometer, or VNIS. And we're not entirely sure what this stuff is. Scientists have thrown around a few ideas, of course. Some think it could be glass that melted when a space rock crashed into the moon, but it could also be alien spit. I'll just say alien spit. I want to go further with that, but you know.
Scientists found that the moon experiences quake events, sometimes lasting far longer than typical earthquakes and originating deep beneath the surface. The seismic instruments left by the Apollo 12 mission revealed that some moonquakes originate hundreds of miles beneath the surface and can persist for over 10 minutes. What makes this disturbing is that the moon was thought to be geologically dead for ages, but these quakes tell a different story. Its interior is still cooling and contracting, the crust is still shifting, and these tremors hint at deep internal motion. Some shallow quakes even reach magnitude 5.5 equivalent. For a place we assume is static and frozen in time, the idea that it is still shaking is unsettling. If you were planning a lunar base, you might want to pick your site carefully, because the moon might just give a little jolt when you least expect it. Here's another. The moon is literally getting smaller. Scientists analyzing top-of-surface imagery and quake data found that the moon's diameter has shrunk by roughly 50 meters over the past several hundred million years. When the interior cools, the outer shell contracts and breaks, forming cliffs called thrust faults tens of meters high. These features still exist today. The dramatic part, what appears to be a calm celestial body, is undergoing structural changes at a planetary scale. I mean, imagine the moon shrinking and cracking while we look up at it, thinking it's unchanged. For future explorers, this matters. What looks like stable ground might be shifting underneath. But for us watchers on Earth, it is a reminder that even the moon is evolving. When you look at the moon, you might assume everything is inert. Think again. Astronomers have documented transient lunar phenomena, or TLPs, flashes, glows, and color changes that appear and vanish on the lunar surface. More than 3,000 such events have been recorded. A flash here, a glow there, an odd reflection at a crater. Hypotheses include tiny meteoroid impacts, gas venting from beneath the surface, even dust disturbed by seismic or thermal activity. But the exact causes remain uncertain. Why is that disturbing? Well, because it suggests the moon isn't as inert and unchanging as we thought. These odd flashes hint at dynamic processes still alive on our familiar satellite. Look closely at certain lunar regions and you'll see bright winding lights called lunar swirls. These patterns don't match typical geology. They're unusually bright, they sit atop old terrain, and they align with localized magnetic anomalies. The moon no longer has a global magnetic field, yet these swirls suggest that rocks beneath the surface got magnetized long ago and are playing tag with solar wind particles now. The real question is, how did those rocks become magnetized, and why exactly here? Some models link it to massive ancient impacts, others to volcanic or internal activity. None fully satisfy the mystery. So these swirls are like cosmic graffiti. They mark places where we know something weird happened, but we don't yet know exactly what. Here's one for the chemistry files. Researchers who studied soil samples from the far side of the moon via recent missions found water content far lower than on the near side. One study found less than 1.5 micrograms of water per gram of soil in the South Pole Aitken region, significantly lower than the near side measurements. This asymmetry puzzles scientists. Why is one hemisphere of the moon so much drier? Possible explanations include ancient impacts that redistributed volatiles, uneven heating and cooling of the crust, or different histories of solar-wind interaction on each side, but none are definitive yet. The takeaway is that even something as fundamental as water distribution on the moon is still full of surprises.
The U-2 rover started poking around on the moon in 2019, collecting data on the far side where astronauts have never set foot, and that just makes this discovery a lot more interesting. Another possibility about why we haven't gone back to the moon in such a long time is that astronauts could have encountered unforeseen hazards or some other type of phenomena during previous missions. Something that's not necessarily alien, just strange. Space is of course full of dangers, from radiation and microgravity to meteoroid impacts and solar storms. It's possible that Apollo astronauts encountered threats beyond what they were prepared for, and quite possibly beyond what they could even explain. So this one is a bit more esoteric, I know, but I'm just throwing some ideas out there. They may have seen something they just couldn't wrap their heads around. Horrifying, but beyond recognition, almost Lovecraftian. Something that made them never want to return. Of course, other than that though, there are the more well-documented dangers, like the harrowing experiences of Apollo 13, which narrowly avoided disaster after an oxygen tank explosion. There are also the long-term effects of space travel on human health, like radiation exposure and bone loss. If astronauts encountered unknown dangers or phenomena on the moon, space agencies would obviously be a lot more cautious going forward. So maybe they prioritized unmanned missions for that very reason. Here's a more cynical idea though. Maybe the moon holds strategic importance for military purposes. Maybe landing on the moon wasn't as much about humanity reaching the stars as it was about gaining control over a valuable piece of rock. I mean, the space race was happening during the Cold War, after all. The Soviets and the US were desperate to get up there. Could there be covert operations that have been going on the moon? Could the moon be in the process of militarization? Advancements in technology have made space-based weapons and surveillance capabilities very feasible. If governments have indeed set up military installations on the moon or are planning to do so, the implications would be huge. And because of how sensitive military operations are and the potential for geopolitical tension, governments may be reluctant to publicly come forward and disclose their activities up there on the moon, not wanting to reveal any classified information. Probably the most likely explanation for me though is this one: money. The allure of returning to the moon is of course undeniable, but I mean, it all comes down to what's practical in the end, right? Funding is one of the main challenges for space exploration in general. There have been advances in space technology, but the cost and complexity of lunar exploration are still big obstacles, particularly for cash-strapped space agencies facing competing priorities and budgetary constraints. Developing the necessary spacecraft, habitats, the propulsion systems for long lunar missions requires a lot of investment and innovation. The long-term sustainability of, say, a lunar base is a big obstacle, because I mean, why go back to the moon if all we're gonna do is look around again? The goal is always to take things another step forward, and at this point it would be establishing an actual base up there, and politics come into play. I'll get more into politics in a minute, but political priorities shift and the public's interest in moon missions can also influence government's funding for space exploration. In recent years, there has been a growing awareness as well of the potential impact of human activities on the moon and even Mars. Scientists and policymakers are getting more concerned about the risk of contaminating the lunar environment with all of Earth's little microbes or disrupting delicate ecosystems that may exist up there. There's no doubt that if we keep going the direction we are, that one day we'll colonize colonize the moon and Mars, but we need to develop protocols and regulations to try and minimize the risk of biological contamination. If we don't, there could be big problems. Politics, they get in the way of everything. As more countries get involved in space exploration, working together becomes even more important. But tensions between countries and different national interests can make forming partnerships tough. Issues like who owns the technology, how resources are shared, and how information is exchanged can all cause problems, especially among countries with their own space plans. To make moon missions successful and space exploration in general more successful, countries need to get along, conflicts will need to be avoided, and we have to put aside our petty squabbles and finally come together as one unified force, because, the deeper we get into space, who knows what we're gonna find. But last on the list, we have moon dust, aka lunar regolith, which covers the moon's surface like a fine, powdery blanket. Dust doesn't sound very intimidating, but it can be, at least on the moon. Unlike the dust you find on stuff like that waffle maker, that person who barely knew you, got you for a Secret Santa 4 years ago that you only used once, moon dust is a different form of dust. It's not even dust. These tiny, sharp grains of sand. It's formed over billions of years from meteoroid impacts, and because the moon lacks any weather erosion, it just stays jagged. So this lunar dust can be a bit of a problem. Anakin Skywalker would hate moon dust. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. But it's more than just annoying and inconvenient. Moon dust can mess up spacesuits, spacecraft, and machinery, potentially causing damage or malfunctions, and accidentally inhaling moon dust would be very dangerous. Moon dust can cause all sorts of respiratory issues. And we're starting things off with some news that actually just came out the other day. Possible hidden structures on the far side of the moon. How exciting is that, right? China's Chang'e 6 rover spotted these buried structures, and news about the study came out in the Journal of Geophysical Research, Planets, which stated the GPR sends electromagnetic pulses into the lunar interior and receives echoes from the subsurface layers. We use the high-frequency channel data to detect the structure of the upper 40 meters along the rover's path, primarily consisting of rock debris and soil. Through this investigation, we have discovered multiple layers in the upper 300 meters, which likely indicate a series of basalt eruptions that occurred billions of years ago. So basically, the moon may have looked very different billions of years ago, because it would have had volcanoes. That is pretty awesome, but this also goes to show that there could be other stuff below the surface of the moon, perhaps something more ominous than the remnants of billion-year-old volcanoes. And it looks like I'm not the only one wondering if there could be something lurking beneath the surface. On to the next point. A new paper by Harvard University's Human Flourishing program discussed the possibility of an alien base hidden inside the moon, and in this base, there could be a number of aircraft used to quickly transport the beings down to Earth in order to continue their research or whatever the hell else they could be doing. We've talked about this kind of thing plenty of times, but it's pretty interesting to see academics from Harvard discussing it. The purpose of this paper was to give a possible explanation for all the UAP sightings that seem to be cropping up more and more in recent years, and the idea that extraterrestrials could be closer to Earth than we may think, with a base hidden right on our very own moon. It definitely makes the increase in UFO or UAP sightings more understandable. Next, I want to discuss something else that was brought up in this paper, the term cryptoterrestrial. This part dives into exactly what type of being may be operating the UAPs and possibly living hidden among us on Earth or even on the moon. The paper discusses 4 theories. The first are what we call human cryptoterrestrials. This theory suggests that a technologically advanced ancient human civilization once existed, but was most likely wiped out by a disaster like a massive flood. But that some remnants of the civilization continue to survive in secret, living in stealth among us today. Then there's the hominid or theropod cryptoterrestrial theory, that a non-human terrestrial species evolved to become technologically advanced and chose to live in hiding, possibly underground. These could be ape-like hominid descendants, we're talking like Bigfoot, Sasquatch type creatures, or even, according to this paper, intelligent descendants of dinosaurs. That's pretty wild. The third is former extraterrestrial or extratemporal cryptoterrestrials. These would be your classic idea of aliens, beings that might have come to Earth from out in space. And lastly, this one gets really crazy, magical cryptoterrestrials. And this is exactly what it sounds like. Basically mystical or magical beings that exist on Earth but remain hidden from human view. Now, we often talk about the potential dangers of intelligent life out in space, but what about wildlife, particularly underwater? Now, I know what you're thinking, there is no water on the moon. Well, it turns out there might be, and before these potential waters are explored remotely with rovers, manned missions may be getting put on hold in order to avoid any potential dangers. The darkest spots on the moon are its poles, and a number of scientists do speculate that there could be water or ice in these areas that could be useful to manned missions in the future. Nick Estes is the Science Operations Manager for ShadowCam, which is a NASA instrument being used to map out the darker areas of the moon. Now, he thinks there may very well be water up there, and where there's water, there's often life. At least that's what we see here on Earth, so who knows what kind of creatures could be swimming around on the moon. There's not as much protection against space debris on the moon as there is on Earth. In fact, there really is none, and this is also quite a problem. Micrometeorites are tiny particles of rock and metal that zip through space, and even though they're small, they can cause damage when they collide with something because of how fast they move, sometimes at speeds of tens of thousands of miles per hour. Now, on Earth, we're protected from these micrometeorites by our atmosphere. When they enter the atmosphere, they burn up and create what we see as shooting stars. But the moon doesn't have an atmosphere to provide this kind of protection. So micrometeorites hit the lunar surface directly. For astronauts and their equipment, this is a big deal. Imagine one of these things flying into a spacesuit. The impact could be strong enough to puncture it, and that wouldn't be good. They could also, of course, damage equipment, so having a lunar base set up isn't as easy as it might seem. Maybe that's why the aliens built theirs below the surface.
On the far side of the moon lies an area called the Compton-Belkovich thorium anomaly, a region rich in thorium, which is a radioactive element, much more than the surrounding terrain. What's weird is the region is a volcanic complex, but it is non-mare, not the usual basaltic lunar seas, and suggests silic volcanism, which is a rarer style. Its thorium concentration stands out strongly compared to standard lunar crust. The existence of such a hotspot raises questions about how and when this volcanism occurred. Some estimates suggest the area might be much younger than typical lunar volcanism, which stopped billions of years ago. It's disturbing in a sense. The moon might have been far more geologically active, at least locally, than our textbooks indicate. What if our assumptions about lunar history are completely wrong? Recent radar studies and older imagery indicate that the moon may hide vast lava tubes. Those are underground tunnels formed by ancient volcanic flows. Researchers announced in 2024 that they found confirmed evidence of a tunnel beneath the surface. These are not small cracks. We're talking conduits tens of meters wide, covered by hardened lava crust with skylight openings visible from orbit. On Earth, we'd consider caves like that remarkable. On the moon, they're astonishing. Why is this disturbing to scientists? Because the interior of the moon may be more hollow, more cavernous than we assumed. If there are large voids underground, what else is happening down there that we haven't seen yet? How stable are those ceilings? What secrets might they hide? And if humans built bases on the moon, these caves might become homes, but only after we fully understand the risks. A recent study discovered strange anomalies in meter-wide rocks and their coating of sun-reflecting particles on the moon. These particles reflect sunlight in odd ways, not matching typical lunar dust behavior. Researchers speculated it may relate to how the lunar crust formed or how the surface evolved under solar and meteoroid bombardment. The unsettling part is that the moon's surface, which many assume to be well understood after decades of mission, still has optical and material properties that we can't fully explain. It's long been known that the moon lacks a global magnetic field, unlike Earth, but now localization and distribution of magnetic anomalies present deeper mysteries. The South Korean Dannery mission found that the far side has more prevalent local magnetic fields than expected. We would expect the near side, which faces Earth and has more basaltic volcanism, to show stronger anomalies. Instead, the far side shows surprising conductivity and magnetism. One suggestion is that the far side was hotter or had more water beneath the surface, but water under a magnetism puzzle? I don't know. The moon's magnetic past is complicated, and that complexity challenges standard models of how it formed and how it evolved. This one is a bit more technical, but seriously wild. Researchers studying the moon using cosmic ray impact modeling found that when ultra-high energy cosmic rays strike the lunar surface, they generate radio pulses. These pulses can reveal buried ice layers up to 9 meters below. What's freaky is that the moon, which we thought of as basically dry and kinda boring, apart from surface ice in shadowed craters, may have hidden ice deposits far deeper, layered beneath several meters of dust. These are not "we'll maybe find ice" theories. The simulations show detectable signatures. It means the moon has a subterranean dimension of mystery and hidden reservoirs we have yet to tap. And if you're into the darker side of things, those hidden ice pockets may not stay hidden forever. They might shift, vent, or change as future missions disturb them. And what will we find?
In part 1, I discussed the possibility of astronauts contaminating places we visit, like the moon, or places we might visit, like Mars. But what about the opposite? Us possibly bringing something back to Earth from the moon. We've never done any prolonged missions up there, so who knows what kind of deadly pathogens could be lurking on the moon that are just invisible to the naked eye. When we think about deadly pathogens, we're usually talking about viruses, bacteria, or other microorganisms that can cause disease. On Earth, we've seen how dangerous these can be, but what about on the moon? Even though the moon isn't known to support life, there's still some concern about pathogens. First of all, who knows if germs brought from Earth could interact with the moon in some unexpected way and possibly even mutate. Then we bring that stuff back to Earth and have some problems. There could also be microorganisms already on the moon, and if they were to be brought back, we could have a deadly situation on our hands as well. Fortunately, NASA does have strict quarantine procedures for astronauts returning from space though, but you never know. Speaking of the moon getting you sick, let's talk about lunar hay fever. This was something astronauts described feeling on the Apollo missions. Lunar hay fever is a term used by astronauts to describe their reaction to lunar dust. When Apollo astronauts visited the moon, they found that the fine, powdery dust on the lunar surface could be a real problem. When astronauts return to their lunar module after a moonwalk, they often bring this dust in with them. The dust sticks to their suits, and because it's so fine and sharp, it gets into everything. Once inside the lunar module, the dust can become airborne and be inhaled. Now, we talked about this in part 1 already, but I didn't really get into the first-hand accounts of what this stuff can do and the effect it would have on their bodies. Astronauts reported symptoms similar to hay fever, sneezing, nasal congestion, sore throats, and even itchy eyes. This reaction was due to the dust being extremely coarse and abrasive. All these tiny little sharp particles caused physical irritation. Astronauts would often describe the inside of the spacecraft smelling like burnt gunpowder because of all the lunar dust. But lunar dust may be more than just an annoyance. Like, who knows what health risks there are when inhaling these particles over long periods of time. The dust is not only sharp, but it's very small, so it can get deep into the lungs and potentially linger there for a long time, Kim Prist, a pulmonary physiologist from the University of California, stated that, quote, particles 50 times smaller than a human hair can hang around for months inside your lungs. The longer the particle stays, the greater the chance for toxic effects. So that's a lot of fun. Astronauts also have to worry about moonquakes. These are exactly what they sound like. They're basically the moon's version of earthquakes. The moon doesn't have tectonic plates like Earth, but it still has quakes. They're just caused by different things. You have a few different categories of moonquakes. There are deep moonquakes. These occur about 500 to 750 miles below the surface and are actually caused by tidal forces from Earth's gravity, which is kind of cool. You have shallow moonquakes. These happen closer to the surface and can be much stronger. These are the most similar to the types of quakes we have here on Earth. These ones are the most concerning. Some have reached up to 5.7 on the Richter scale, and to put that into perspective, that's strong enough to cause damage to buildings if it were to happen on Earth. And obviously, meteorite impacts will also cause tremors. So I probably don't really need to explain why moonquakes could be a problem for future crewed missions to the moon, especially more prolonged ones. It seems like the moon also just doesn't really like our company very much. It's slowly distancing itself from us day by day. It gets about 3.8 centimeters further away every year. Now, this may not be a reason as to why NASA hasn't been back to the place in decades, but it is sort of an unsettling fact about the moon. Now, 3.8 centimeters per year may not sound like very much, but over time it can have some significant effects. The moon's gravity is the main force behind Earth's tides. As the moon moves further away, its gravitational pull on Earth weakens. This means our tides will become less dramatic. High tides won't be as high, low tides won't be as low, which can and will have an effect on ecosystems on coastlines. The moon also helps stabilize Earth's axial tilt. This tilt is responsible for our seasons. Without the moon's help, Earth's tilt could vary more wildly, which would lead to extreme changes in climate and seasons and make our weather patterns even less predictable than they are now. And finally, we gotta talk about the big elephant in the room, that maybe NASA hasn't done another crewed mission to the moon in decades because we never even went in the first place. Yes, the whole moon landing was a hoax conspiracy. Now, personally, I don't think the moon landing was a hoax. I have more faith in humanity and our abilities, and I just find this conspiracy just kind of pessimistic. But it is a conspiracy that's talked about a lot, even in the comments of part 1, so I'm bringing it up now. The idea here is that, of course, it's pretty simple. The space race was in full swing. The Soviets and the USA were desperate to prove their technological superiority, but both being unable to make a moon landing happen, one country decided to head to a soundstage and fake the whole thing. Some even say Stanley Kubrick directed the moon landing footage himself.